Carden. He, of course, is the Realist Review on Substack, best place to go to follow all of his work. He also writes for a variety of outlets, and he is a member of the board and senior advisor to Acura, which is one of the more important organizations that we have focusing on U.S.-Russian relations. James, welcome back to the show. How are you doing today?
I'm doing all right. Thank you very much.
Happy to have you here. We have a lot I want to cover and touch on. Weapons to Ukraine. What's going on with Donald Trump sending Ukraine weapons? What does it mean? Netanyahu's remarks on "We are not finished yet." Does Israel want peace? And Trump comparing himself to Truman. So let's just jump into it with this first clip of Donald Trump discussing giving weapons to Ukraine.
Are you planning to send more weapons to Ukraine?
We're going to send some more weapons. We have to. They have to be able to defend themselves. They're getting hit very hard now. They're getting hit very hard. We're going to have to send more weapons. Yeah, defensive weapons primarily, but they're getting hit very, very hard. Very sad. So many people are dying in that mess.
So, James, I really want to know what you think about this. Trump, we've had statements from the Pentagon saying we're running out of Patriots. We only have 25% of the Patriot interceptors, this missile defense system that is really crucial to the U.S., defending our bases around the world and things like that. We only have 25% of what we need. And yet Trump is now talking about sending more Patriots to Ukraine. So what the hell is going on with Trump's Ukraine policy?
I don't think he knows himself. I think that he expected that he would come into office, sweet talk Putin, sweet talk Zelensky, and his expectations have been dashed, and now he doesn't quite know what to do. The problem, I think, now is that since he's been disappointed in his expectations, he is going to take the advice of the hawks that he surrounded himself with. And so he voiced his displeasure with Putin at that most recent cabinet meeting. And he is going to be hostage to very bad advice. As I warned, as you all warned at antiwar.com, as people at the American Conservative warned, as people at Responsible Statecraft warned during the transition, that Trump was making the same mistake that he made early on in his first term, in that he was surrounding himself with hawks. And if you surround yourself with hawks, you're going to get hawkish advice. And that seems to be what is happening right now with Trump's Ukraine policy.
This interesting development that we have where before Biden left office, they were approving a whole bunch of weapons transfers to Ukraine. And really, I think took the amount of funds they had down from like the tens of billions of dollars all the way to about $3 billion. And so the U.S. has been sending weapons to Ukraine under Trump, but those were the weapons that were already approved, already paid for under the Biden administration. Now we have the Wall Street Journal reporting that Trump is considering sending an additional Patriot battery to Ukraine. I know these things cost billions of dollars. And so if we send this to Ukraine, it would seem to me that Trump would then have to go to Congress sometime in the fall in order to continue to provide weapons to Ukraine, should that be the road that he goes down. And so if Trump is going beyond just sending the weapons that Biden already approved and is sending additional weapons, spending more U.S. money on this war, does this effectively make this Trump's war? And do you think he goes to Congress to look for more aid?
Yes, and yes. I think he absolutely will. And I think that there's no doubt that he will have to, because he's also embroiled us in another war, the Israeli rampage on Gaza and the Israeli war on Iran. So he came in to office after having campaigned as a peace candidate of sorts during the 2024 campaign. And within a matter of 6 months, he's up to his eyeballs in a war in Eastern Europe, which he pledged he would stop. And he got dragged in to a war against Iran. So he's going to have to feed both of these very hungry clients of ours, and it's unfortunate. But once again, personnel is policy, and so if you appoint a career neocon hawk like Marco Rubio to both the State Department and as your national security advisor, that's the sort of stuff that's going to happen. Let me say one other thing about the war within the Trump administration between the hawks and the restrainers. The hawks understand that the wind is now at their back. And so you can see this very clearly in a recent piece in Politico. It was a hit piece on Bridge Colby at the Pentagon. Bridge Colby is one of the only senior officials in the government who can make claim to be a true restrainer. And Politico talked to about, I think it was 7 anonymous sources within the administration who were intent on portraying Colby as some sort of out of control rogue element within the administration. So that's what's happening. And it's unfortunate. And I'm very disheartened that it took only a matter of months for Trump to repeat the mistakes that he made in the first administration. But as a friend of mine who has worked with Trump, who knows Trump, has told me many times, Trump is unable to learn, and so that's what we're seeing. And I think it's a terrible shame.
Well, I agree with you. And so I was a little bit skeptical about Elbridge Colby when he was coming into the Pentagon, but apparently it was his decision, his report, his analysis of the evidence that said we simply don't have enough Patriot interceptors to continue to send them to Ukraine. We use dozens of them to shoot down incoming Iranian missiles in Israel. We, according to the CENTCOM general, we had the largest Patriot missile battle in history to defeat the symbolic Iranian missile barrage fired at the Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar. And so obviously we're going through a lot of these missiles. And as you say, personnel is policy. However, reality has to have some impact on policy as well. And once there is no more weapons to send to Ukraine, once there's no more interceptors to give to the Ukrainians, doesn't that necessarily have to change the policy? I mean, Trump and all these people are very warned apparently about Taiwan and China invading Taiwan. Well, if these patriots, if there was an ample supply of them, who's on back order? Who's waiting to get their patriots? It's Taiwan, right? They want them to shoot down incoming Chinese missiles potentially, and yet we're giving them to the Ukrainians. And so at some point, doesn't a choice have to be made? Isn't reality some factor in this?
You would hope. I'm not convinced that reality plays much of a role in the formulation of Trump's foreign policy. With regard to China and Taiwan, the administration is working overtime to create a second Cold War front in the Indo-Pacific. Only today, again from Politico, comes the headline: Chinese spies threaten Taiwan's war readiness. And so, we're supposed to be concerned about the, quote, level of penetration and intensity that the Chinese are committing in Taiwan in order to subvert Taiwanese, national security. So, it's absurd. He campaigns as a peace candidate. He doesn't appoint anyone except for Gabbard, who now he's frozen out, right? Who shares that view. And so now the U.S. is potentially, we're involved in a war more deeply than the American people understand in Eastern Europe. We're involved in the slaughter in Gaza. We're basically heading the effort in Iran on behalf of the Israelis. And now they have their eyes on another front in Taiwan. So please explain to me the difference between this and the Biden administration.
Yeah, I mean, this is a good point. It's the foreign policy establishment doing what the foreign policy establishment does. It doesn't seem in any significant way. Things have really changed since the Bush administration. I don't know what term this would be, 6 or 7 of George W. Bush's now, but that does effectively seem to be the policy. Now, I want to change our conversation and talk about what is going on in Gaza. We just had Benjamin Netanyahu making his third trip to Washington since Trump came into office, which seems to be a lot of trips from a single foreign leader. This time he met with Donald Trump twice, and this is one of the things that he had to say.
We have still to finish the job in Gaza, release all our hostages, eliminate and destroy Hamas's military and governance capabilities, because Gaza must have a different future for our sake, for everyone's sake. And no country will settle for less. We certainly will not. These are all things that I discussed with President Trump. I may discuss further with him later in this visit. But I have to say that the coordination between our two countries, the coordination between an American president and an Israeli prime minister, has been unmatched. It offers great promise for Israel, for America, for our region, and for the world.
So, I really took two things from this statement, and I want to get your thoughts on them. The first, of course, is Netanyahu saying we got to finish the job, which means the killing is going to go on in Gaza. But the other thing, him saying he's talking about this with Donald Trump, they're working on together. There's this high level of coordination. And for all the reports that we've seen about apparent splits between Trump and Netanyahu, to me, they seem to be on the same page about everything. So I'd like to get your thoughts on that.
I have a number of thoughts on it, beginning with Netanyahu's incredible statement about Gaza's future. What future is he talking about? They've decimated Gaza. They're in the process of murdering hundreds of thousands of people. It really is sickening to see this war criminal welcomed with open arms. They roll out the red carpet for him. They do everything he wants. It's disgraceful. And we should have no part of it. But the American elite is captured by AIPAC and by Netanyahu. And there are virtually no voices in the United States Congress who have spoken out against this, with the honorable exceptions of Thomas Massey and possibly a few progressives. So I think it's disgusting. The other thing that I think is disgusting is the announcement from Rubio's State Department today that they're going to sanction Francesca Albanese, who is the head of the UN office monitoring events in Gaza. She's a top UN human rights official. Rubio's statement says that Albanese is directing a campaign of political and economic warfare against the United States and Israel. What a load of garbage. How dishonest and how shameful. And, to think that I at least thought that Trump was going to break with the Biden, Blinken, Sullivan policy of indulging this mass murderer. I'm at a loss for words, really.
Well, yeah, I think I maybe share some of your optimism here, just how bold Netanyahu has been, how clear that it is that Israel, gets to put their policy even ahead of the American policy. When it's very clear in Ukraine, right? The narrative's a little bit different with Israel, but if we're talking about the need for weapons, logistical shortages, can we, swat down all these Iranian missiles for Israel? I think Dave DeCamp at antiwar.com put out a report saying that about 1.5 million in THAAD interceptors alone were used over that 12-day war. So this is obviously coming at a massive price tag for the American government. If you're really putting America first and not Israel first, then the policy should be to rein in Benjamin Netanyahu. But as you said initially, personnel is policy, and it seems that personnel within the Trump administration, particularly CIA Director John Ratcliffe, have in many ways been captured by Tel Aviv and are, just repeating like Mossad and Likud talking points. And so I also have wrote this one for JudgeNap.com. Ron Dermer, the Israeli Strategic Affairs Minister and one of the closest allies to Benjamin Netanyahu, is apparently at the White House all the time. And so my guess is that the narrative that's being beaten to Trump's head is not only what Netanyahu is telling him, but then he hears the same thing from his own officials. He hears it from Ron Dermer. He's gained it from just all these different directions. And Trump doesn't know enough to go, not watch Fox News for 15 minutes, go watch like Judge Knapp's program or some other foreign policy analyst, Daniel L. Davis, and really get a good breakdown on this. And, Fox News is just telling him the same thing that the Israelis are. And so it seems our president has boxed himself in and is allowing himself to be drug along down the path by a country that doesn't have America's best interest first.
Let me be very clear about Ron Dermer for a minute. Dermer was born and raised in the United States. He was born and raised in Florida. Ron Dermer is a traitor to the United States, every bit as much as someone like Mark Levin is. And I think it's disgraceful that people like that basically act as though they are representing both countries. I think that's disgraceful. And he was the ambassador. Netanyahu purposefully appointed him ambassador to the United States during the Obama administration as a slap in the face to the United States. So, if you have people like that running around Washington, no good is going to come from it.
Couldn't agree with you more there. I want to move on now. And, this is one of the things that we always hear. Israel wants peace. Israel is just trying to get to the point where they could have peace with their neighbors, peace with their Palestinians. And it's the Arabs with their irrational hatred of the Jews that just won't let the Israelis live in peace. So let's hear what Netanyahu has to say about this.
Do you think that there can be a two-state solution that creates an independent?
I don't know. I'd ask Bibi that question. You have the greatest man in the world to answer that age-old question, two-state. Go ahead. You give him your honest answer.
I think Palestinians should have all the powers to govern themselves, but none of the powers to threaten us. And that means that certain powers, like overall security, will always remain in our hands. Now, that is a fact. And no one in Israel will agree to anything else because we don't commit suicide. We want life, we cherish life for ourselves, for our neighbors. And I think we can work out a peace between us and the entire Middle East with President Trump's leadership. And by working together, I think we can establish a very, very broad peace that will include all our neighbors.
So, a couple things here. One, that he's saying, there could be a two-state solution. The Palestinians could govern themselves. Of course, they could never have a military. And so what kind of state is effectively created knowing that they don't get to have a military? But I think he's really talking about the entire Middle East there, where we could have peace with all of our neighbors once they no longer have the capacity to threaten us, which means he wants to turn, as the entire Middle East into either bought and paid for kingdoms like Jordan or entire failed states like we now see in Libya, Syria, or Somalia. So I guess, go ahead.
Did I hear him say they treasure life?
Yeah.
I mean, what are you going to say to something like that? I mean, it's ridiculous. All they do is lie, and all we do is accept it.
Kind of the pattern here. Now, I know I see a lot of debate on this about the potential for a two-state solution. Do you have kind of weigh in on one side or the other? I know some people say at this point Israel has just taken too much of Palestine to have a continuous Palestinian state. I mean, Gaza is effectively gone at this point, and Israel is in the middle of annexing the West Bank. So is the two-state solution even possible at this point?
No. I mean, if you believe in the two-state solution, you probably also believe in the Easter Bunny and Santa Claus. I mean, Israel is never going to allow it, and what they're going to do is exterminate the Palestinian population, drive them out. That's the plan. That's been the plan all along. Let's not be, let's not be fooled. That was the plan beginning in 1948. And Netanyahu, in his way, is a historic Israeli figure because he has basically done more to accomplish what the Israeli ethno-nationalist right has always dreamed.
Well, this is one of my real concerns after October 7th is in a lot of ways this is the Netanyahu policy blowing up in his face, years and years of propping up Hamas and making sure they stay in power in Gaza. So he never had to negotiate a two-state solution because, even if Fatah, the Palestinian Authority, is compliant and reasonable, he could always just say, well, what can you do? You got these murderous thugs Hamas, while at the same time allowing the Qataris to send them all the money that they need to remain the government of Gaza. And so on October 7th, when this blows up in his face, Netanyahu, I think, is kind of faced with the choice. Either his legacy is going to be the man who spent 2 decades propping up Hamas, only for them to carry out the most successful attack against Israel in history, or he's going to exploit this. And I mean, I think maybe to a degree that he couldn't have even fathomed when this started. Not only is he in the process of taking Gaza and quietly, I mean, not quietly for the Palestinians of the West Bank, but as far as international coverage goes, he's quietly taking Gaza. He's kicked Hezbollah out of southern Lebanon, and Israel is occupying that. And he's taken a large swath of southern Syria as well. And so whenever you say historic Israeli figure, I think that's how Netanyahu sees himself. We heard a lot of that rhetoric during the Biden administration. Amos Hochstein and other officials were saying that we have a historic opportunity to reshape the Middle East. And so when Netanyahu says the job isn't finished yet, my real concern is that he's talking about ethnic cleansing, not only of Palestine, but also southern Gaza and Syria as well. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's right. I'm glad you mentioned Amos, who is a kind of a Ron Dermer figure verse for a piece for anti-war a number of years ago. I pointed out that Amos was raised in Israel. His parents are in Israel. He came over here as a congressional staffer. There's absolutely no information publicly available on Hochstein's education, where he came from. He's a very shadowy, mysterious figure. Even people I've spoken to in the Biden administration have said that, they've been told that this guy is not what he seems. I have multiple people have told me this. Hochstein is, for all intents and purposes, an Israeli agent, no doubt about it. And Dermer is the same sort of thing, except Dermer was born in the United States and now openly works for Israel. So you have these sorts of characters all over Washington. They get appointed to all sorts of positions. They don't play by the same rules. The security clearance rules are different for someone like Hochstein than they are for actual Americans. It's absurd. The other thing I would like to point out, and this has been underappreciated, is that it's bad enough. It shouldn't matter what religion you are when you're being targeted by the IDF. But I think what a lot of American Christians don't understand is that Christians are being targeted by the IDF in this mass slaughter as well. Churches are being targeted, bombed, Christian communities being targeted, Christians being murdered, Gaza, West Bank. Look at what they're doing. If you're curious about this, your readers might want to look at what's going on to the Armenian quarter in Jerusalem, a historic Christian part of Jerusalem. I think people are, blinded by some sort of pretend allegiance to Israel when they're targeting not just Muslims, they're targeting anyone who's not Jewish. And indeed, they've murdered American protesters who've gone over there in cold blood. They ran a bulldozer over a girl who was in college who was protesting what they were doing to the Palestinians. I would urge people to look that stuff up, and then, question your representatives as to why we support stuff like this. It isn't in the American interest. Besides being morally abhorrent.
And just to add, young woman's name was Rachel Correa. If people want to look up that story, absolutely horrific. So before we wrap up here, I did have one more clip of Donald Trump I wanted to play, comparing himself to Harry S. Truman for all the worst reasons possible.
They flew for 37 hours with zero problem mechanically. I mean, when you think in carrying the biggest bombs ever, the biggest bombs that we've ever dropped on anybody, when you think non-nuclear, and we want to keep it non-nuclear, by the way. But they did a phenomenal job. It was an amazing job. And I think I was talking to Bibi about it before, that was the very beginning of the end. It ended very quickly after that. I don't want to say what it reminded me of, but if you go back a long time ago, it reminded people of a certain other event, and Harry Truman's picture is now in the lobby, in a nice location in the lobby where it should have been, but that stopped a lot of fighting, and this stopped a lot of fighting. When that happened, it was a whole different ballgame.
So I mean, I don't even know exactly what question I want to ask you here. He is, comparing what he did in Iran to Harry Truman's nuclear bombing of 2 Japanese cities, and just absolutely horrific war crimes. And he's proud and smiling and just touting what a successful mission it was. What are your thoughts?
I think the comparison to Truman is apt. I believe very firmly that American history changed for the worse on April 12, 1945. Now, I know this is a libertarian-minded show, so I don't expect that we agree on economics too much. But Harry Truman's takeover, once Roosevelt died, was basically the beginning of the national security state. And in a very, very short time, Truman made it the business of the United States to embark on an unnecessary, unneeded, and very costly Cold War that lasted 40 years. And I think that Trump, in his way, is like Truman, who, let's remember, committed 2 very ghastly war crimes when he dropped the bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Truman's legacy remains with us. It remains with us. It's a bipartisan legacy. Both parties have embraced it, and we're the worse off for it.
There, and the post World War II foreign policy has largely destroyed what was great about this country, and now we're just hoping for a little bit more of a realist retrenchment, maybe, and a better path forward. Unfortunately, it seemed that the guy who was running on a policy of America first and saying a lot of good things about this is not putting us on the right track, and it's just further going down the road of empire. James Carden, thank you so much for joining me today. Everybody check him out on Substack, The Realist Review. Great stuff. We reprint tons of it at antiwar.com. James, thanks for coming on the show today, and hopefully we can do it again.
Thanks a lot, Kyle. Appreciate it.